Okay, so this is lecture 1 for the felony class. Excuse me. These allergies are killing me. Sorry about that. This is the continuation of the misdemeanor class. And as you already know, you probably experienced this the last module, the misdemeanor class is a very difficult class. And, most of you took the final examination when we did the one-on-one oral exam. I realized, and as it happens all the time, that some of you don't have the speed yet and need to do some more work on the material from the misdemeanor class. And, that is so typical. It happens all the time, so you shouldn't feel bad about it. However, you need to do some more work. The good news is that this class is way easier than the previous one. And the reason why it's way easier is just very simple. The rights that you studied already, everything that you study in misdemeanor applies to felony. So you don't have to study them again. The only difference between felony and misdemeanors, perhaps, is the crimes. There are more drug-related crimes, attempted murder, attempted rape, and so on and so forth. And the other thing that you will notice that it's different is that some pleas, they are a little bit different. In a felony course, the judge is going to ask, it has to say what is the low term, the high term, and the mid term, and so on and so forth. So there's some variations there that we're going to be looking at in this class. But those rights, those consequences of the plea, all that is the same. And, that's kind of good news. That's why it makes this class much easier. Now, it doesn't look like it's going to be that easier based on the manual. So if you look at the manual, you see that you have a manual that is 87 pages long. It's basically, it looks like I have to study all this. Well, not really. I wouldn't be too concerned about the manual. There is not a lot of new information. If you look at, for example, for lecture 1, we're still dealing with misdemeanors, okay? It's a form that is actually a misdemeanor form. This is we're going to discuss it today after the break, and this is something you need to learn, but it is something that that doesn't have really a lot of new terminology. When you get to to the lecture number 2, for example, it's basically a waiver and felony advisement of rights waiver and plea form. You remember that in the class for misdemeanor, there were different type of waivers and plea form. One for DUI, one was general, and there is one for drugs. There are many different ones. Well, in felony court, it's just one. It's just one form only. So when you look at the form, that's for lecture number 2, you probably see, oh, that's pretty long. But in fact, most of those terms are repeated from the misdemeanor class. There might be some variations on some new things. Okay, so here I'm looking at it. But this is all vocabulary that you will find to be, you will be familiar with. And if you are not, you just review it. That's all there is to it. So it won't take too long to really study this. And then comes this form ends in a couple of more pages, and it will end. Okay, so then after the form, that is for lecture number 2, what do we have in terms of homework? Wow, it's longer than I expected. We have what we call a proceeding. It's a guilty plea or no contest in felony cases. Usually in felony cases, you enter just guilty pleas, not no contest plea. And this is kind of identical to what you have seen in California Judges Bench Guide. So there isn't really anything new here, except that instead of the word probation, they use the word parole. Okay, there's a lot of parole in felony courses, in felony crimes. which is libertad preparatoria. So there is probation is usually associated with misdemeanors, and parole is associated with felonies. Okay? So when we look at it, well, yes, a lot of material, but all this I mean, do you have sufficient time to speak to your attorney? Look, everything else, everything that you see here, you pretty much know. To that count, or no, you did commit the offense of in violation of section, blah, blah, blah. This is all very straightforward. And lecture 4 is actually is a combination of different proceedings. And I'm giving you samples of those proceedings, and we are discussing them in class. And this is basically what you see in lecture 4 is what we do on 95% of the cases. And if you add the California Judges Bench Guide to it, definitely that's the case. So it's not going to be difficult either. Trust me, it's going to be very straightforward. So it's all that. Sorry for the speed here. And then after lecture 4, which has all the proceedings, and it's a very good lecture to review before you start working in the court system once you pass your exam. It's pretty long, but it's not something that you're going to have to learn a lot of stuff. I mean, it's all there. It's all, you already know. And then on page number, I believe, 54 comes the reference material. So what I did in this manual is I put all the material that we discussed in the felony and misdemeanor course, and I put it by proceedings. So, for example, for arraignments, these are all the possible terms, okay? And then for progress report, these are the possible terms with their corresponding translations. For certified plea, which is basically when the defendant enters a guilty or no contest plea, these are the possible words. So everything is given to you now by proceedings so that you can review it once you start working in the court system. Then you have the pre-trial hearing, all these possible ones. In preliminary hearing, these are all the possible terms. In trials, the same thing. Then you have all the possible objections, and then you also have all the possible motions, okay? And you have all the jury instructions, which we're going to discuss in this class what that means, okay? And what else? And then we have, I mean, it's all that we do in court, on a daily basis. We have juvenile terminology. This is something you might need, although it's not part of your state exam, but you will need it once you start working in the court system. And then you have children's court. That's when the child has been a victim of a crime. And usually the ones who committed the crime happens to be the parents of the child. So you can see it's all provided. This is not in the state exam, but this is given to you as just basically it's like having a little dictionary, but divided by proceeding and also divided by what we call expert witness testimony. In this case, it would be for a firearm terminology, firearm expert witness, and then you have one for, I missed that, drug terminology or for drug expert witness on drugs. And so here's the slang and everything. And then you have another one for fingerprints, okay? And then finally you have gang terminology. So as you can see, you basically have in those pages from page 54 till the end, it's just all reference material. You don't have to study that in this class. And technically you should know all that. But it is something important for you to actually review, particularly before you start working in the court system. You have no idea how many, I see a lot of my former students who still carry these notes because that gives them, particularly when you start working in the court system for the first 6 months, it gives you some safety net. You just basically you're sitting down waiting for the next case, and you look at your calendar of the day, and you know that the next one is going to be preliminary hearing, so you review it before. And then the next one that comes your way, which will be in an hour and a half, for example, will be progress report, so you review it until you become really familiar with it. So the beauty of it is, of course, that you have all of it in one per proceeding, instead of having all these legal terms all over the place or all these expressions all over the place. So kind of to summarize, the amount of work or the amount of new vocabulary that you're going to be dealing with in this class is really limited. But by the same token, I have to say that many of you still need to do some more work from the misdemeanor course. Some of you need to actually go back and do some work with the terminology. So that's why I like this class, and that's how I structure it like this. This class, which is really the last class before you can actually interpret in court, because after you finish this class, you are ready to interpret in court. You just need to pass the exam, but you're really ready to interpret in court. If you were to go to any court anytime now, after a couple of weeks here, you'll realize that you can interpret everything. The only thing that is missing in your program is the state exam, and that's why for the state exam, you need to take the site translation courses and then the preparation course. Those courses that you take after this one are just specifically for the state examination. But to interpret in the court system, once you finish this course, you're ready to go. But it's not about finishing the course. Many of you have holes here and there, gaps, and that needs to be corrected. So a good plan for this class is for you to go back and review everything that has to do with the misdemeanor course, because in reality, if you know all the vocabulary that comes out in the practices for the misdemeanor course, then you really know all the previous words that we study in the simultaneous and in the consecutive courses. Now, to go back to the misdemeanor course, you don't have access to the lectures, but you certainly have access to the lab. I'm showing you here, this what you're looking at, and then here is access to the online lab. So if we click on it, it's going to ask you whether you want to do the simultaneous and the simultaneous and consecutive labs are put together, and the misdemeanor and this lab are together. So if we want to go to misdemeanor and lab, week number 1 is going to be week number 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be exactly the same thing that you had in your misdemeanor class. Okay, so here's the Judge's Bench Guide Part 1, Part 2. And what do you need to concentrate on in terms of the lab? Definitely Judge's Bench Guide Part 1 and 2, which most of you know. But if you don't, I already discussed this with you when you took your one-on-one exam with me. I already told you what you should do. But you should also go over advisement of rights. That's week number 2 and week number 4. One is a lecture, and the other one is actually the script with the translation. You should know that. You should work on those. And then finally, on court proceedings and change of plea. With change of plea is the same thing as Judge's Bench Guide Part 2. And court proceedings is a compilation of different proceedings that you might want to review. So that's the material from last course. For this course starts in week number 6. And in week number 6, there is a lecture on consecutive techniques, closing argument, because that's more for trials, more court proceedings, opening statements, that's more for trials, some practices in consecutive, and then mock exams. Mock exams are exams similar to what you would get when you take your real examination. So we call it simulacro de examen. So that's on week, and then there are many on week number 2. So there's plenty of practice for this class. Oh, rest assured you have a lot of practice for this class. But, the way you should do this is before you get you jump into the pool for material for this class, so to speak. You want to make sure that you have all you know how to swim. And you know how to swim if you know your material from the previous course. So you got to go back to weeks 1, 2, 3, 4 in this lab here and continue practicing, getting the speed and so on and so forth. Now, you don't want to spend more than 2 or 3 weeks on that, and then maybe 1 or 2 weeks on this one. And remember, when you start the next course, you're going to have access to this whole lab again, okay? Now, the good news, there are a couple of good news here for this class. Number 1, we have class today, we have class the next week, but we don't have class the Thanksgiving weekend. So November 26th, there is no class. So our lecture 3 will be December 3rd, and lecture 4 will be December 10th. And we're going to finish, I'm going to give you the oral exam from the 12th until the 17th or so. So you'll get your report card, way before Christmas. Then during the Christmas break, I know we're all busy with all these different family activities and so on and so forth. Some of you may be traveling to other countries, other places. That's fine, but you have access to this class or to the lab until the first day of class until the day before the first day of class in the next course. Let me take a look at see what date that would be. It would be. Let me see if I can get this so that we know up to what date you have access. The class schedule for the next year, it's going to begin. The first class is going to begin on January 14th. So you're going to have access until January 12th. So what happens here is that you finish on December 10th. You have 1 month access to the lab and the lectures for this class and all the labs that you took so far. So that gives you time to continue working with the lab. And then when you start working in the next course with site translation on January 14th, I believe that's when it's offered, yes, at the same time, it's at 11 o'clock, you'll be able to access these labs. And I will continue telling you to go back and review it, okay? So it's not going to be that difficult. The best thing for you is not just to say, well, it's an easy class, I can pass it, no problems, blah, 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 so I'm not going to do anything. This next 4 or 5 weeks, I'm just going to be getting ready for Christmas, Thanksgiving. It's okay, you can get ready for it. These are normal human activities. You should do that. It's healthy for you. But you should not disregard your class. And the fact that you have more time available, the best, most efficient way to handle that time is to actually go back and review, particularly because many of you do need it. Now, there are some students who were able to accomplish very good speeds, but I did mention one-on-one, where you need to work on. But in general, most of you need to go back to Judge's Bench Guide, Parts 1 and 2, Advisement of Rights. You need to do that one as well because we haven't actually finished. So misdemeanor was really rough. You were able to overcome it. Now felony, it's going to be much easier, but you got to go back. Some of you have to even go back to previous courses because I identify problems that you don't know your legal terms yet. You need to know your legal terms. Let me be very clear here. If you don't know your legal terms, you will never, ever, ever, ever pass the state exam. So don't wait too long because when we get to the preparation course, we're going to be using legal terms. You have to use that last course to get you ready for the exam, not to learn the terms that you should have learned 9 months earlier. So now this is the class that will allow you to catch up, okay? So let's go over some questions. Yes, good, okay, good. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, you have to go back to the labs. You will start working in the course. Actually, once you finish this course, you are ready. You may not have the speed, which can be you may need a little more time. The next courses after this one, which is Cite from English into Spanish, Cite from Spanish into English, and the preparation for the state exam, are only there because you have to pass the state exam. In a program where the goal was to get you ready to start working in the court system, I would probably take 2 more courses, 5-week courses. There's no need to do 6 more months, just 3 more months, and I would make sure that you get the speed, and that's all. That's all I would do, and then you will be ready to start working in the courts. But you got to pass the exam, and we'll talk about the exam, and then once we get into it. But right now, this is material. Everything you study so far is suitable for the exam, and it's also suitable to be a court interpreter. And in the last 3 courses that we're going to take, everything there is mainly suitable for the exam. We can practice some more. Yes, exactly. When and where do we sign up for the state exam? Well, you need to take a written examination first, and then you need to take the oral exam. In your case, let's see, you probably won't be able to take the exam in March because you will not have completed the preparation for the state examination course. So in your case, you probably end up taking it in the summer of 2023, but you got to take the written exam. When you start the next course, which is the site translation course, you're going to have access to a free course on preparing you for the written state examination. And it's free, it's part of your laboratory. So you can start thinking next, when you start next course, start concentrating on the written, and then that maybe for 2-3 months, concentrate on that. Take it, pass it, and then you start concentrating on the oral. Most likely you're going to take it in August or September, because you can't really take it in March. And at that time, I'll give you information on how to do that. What is the date for the final exam for this class, and what will be the final focus on? Well, the final exam for this class is on all the courses you've taken so far. And there is a written exam that you can take between the 11th and the 17th. So you take the written. And then there is an oral exam that you will schedule for about 15-20 minutes between those dates, and between the 12th and the 19th. And so I will finish with everything by the 19th. That's for sure. Okay. So there will be oral final examinations taking place most likely the week of the 12th to the 19th, in case you're planning some trips. And if you are planning the trip or whatever, you can take the final exam oral as early as the 12th of December. How often do they have the state exam? Twice a year. Yeah, the ESME is giving you the link. It's prometric.com. That's correct. On 11/26, there is no class. From 12:10, actually 12:12, because 12:10 is a Saturday and I teach that class. But from 12:12 until 12:17, maybe 12:18, which is, I believe that 12:17 is the oral exam. Most of you will probably take it on Saturday the 17th. What will the next class what will be the next class in 01/14/20? The next class is called Site Translation for Court Interpreters, English into Spanish. Starts on Saturday, January 14. You're right. Okay, perfect. All right. So, having said that, we want to do. So what are you going to hear from me in terms of lecture? You will see that the emphasis on this class is always practice. So it's going to be a lot of practice here. So let me just give you a word of caution about this, because I was able to detect something when I gave you the one-on-one evaluation or final exam. It appears that some of you, when I play the practice here in class, you don't interpret out loud. You just listen or you write terms. That is a no-no. You don't want to do that. The best way for you is to precisely struggle with the practices here in class, because those are the ones that are similar to state exam. When you don't do that, you don't practice, you don't get to get familiar with it. So the rule should be, when I play practice, and I will play a lot of practices in this class, we're going to start with some misdemeanor practices that are not that bad, but then we're going to get into felony practices, even today. So when I play a practice here, you need to interpret as if you were taking the state exam. Interpret out loud, at home. If you can record yourself, it will be even better. That's the most efficient way of doing this. Any other approach that you take, and by the way, when I say interpret, it means you don't stop if you don't know a term. Just skip the term and keep going so that you master the technique. Then, during the week, you can always come back, all right, and watch the lecture again. And then, at that point, you can stop the practice. You can write down the terms you don't know. You can do whatever you want. You can write the terms, whatever you want, but not while we are in class. Okay, in class you have to interpret. You don't know a term, you skip it. You interpret out loud, not in your head, because it will show in your evaluation. Okay, very, very important that you do that. So in class, I'm going to be concentrating mainly on practices. But I will be lecturing on issues that have to do with felonies. We're going to be looking also at different proceedings. What's a probation violation hearing? What is a progress report? These are more like in the misdemeanor category. You have to understand that interpreters work much more in misdemeanor than in felonies simply because there are many more misdemeanor cases than felonies cases. So we're going to be working on that. I'm going to be lecturing, giving you some tips in terms of how to interpret this, and even this, I will be discussing the environment in the interpreter's office in a misdemeanor court versus in a felony court, and so on and so forth. And of course, practice at all time. But it only will be helpful if you actually interpret out loud and you skip the terms that you don't know and you keep going. Don't get stuck because you don't know a term and start writing down the term. Don't do that, please. So we will also be playing some tapes from court for you to become familiar to other issues in court, such as noise and difficulty in hearing the judge and so on and so forth. And we will briefly touch some ethics of the interpreters as well, which will help you prepare for the written examination. When can I register for the immigration class? Anytime now. Once you are in this class, felony, you can sign up for that online course. What it helps to have headphone on and interpret out loud. That's exactly right. Yeah. Now, I do have to announce, let's see, yeah, we have 17 people. I do have to announce that the company that provides interpreters for the immigration courts would are inviting you to apply because they're really desperate looking for interpreters. You are capable of starting the process right now, and you can. It doesn't matter where you live in what state. They need it all over the U.S. They need hundreds of people. They need a lot of Spanish-speaking interpreters. So they asked me to announce, to give you a link. I'll give you that link after the break today. And that's the link to actually apply, and you have to fill out the application form. And then a recruiter would contact you. And so this is the procedure. First of all, you have to somehow justify in your resume that you have 1 year experience in the judiciary system. Now, I'm not telling you to lie. That's not what I'm saying here, okay? So don't quote me on this. But I'm telling you that they're not going to verify that information that you put there. And experience in the judiciary system could be something like, I work in a law firm, or at one time I interpreted. If you interpret one time for a friend somewhere in court, you can say interpreted in a small claims court since 2020 up to now, because you are still offering those services to any friend for free, but there is no work. You don't have to specify that you only interpreted one time. What must be included in your resume is that at least they can look at it and they say at least you have 1 year of that judiciary experience. Some internships help. If you work in workers' compensation, help. But again, they are not going to verify that. Okay, so you don't even have to write a phone number actually, because if you do it on your own. So I'm not saying you should lie, but I'm just giving you information on how to kind of help you deal with that 1 year requirement. Okay. Now, so I get you the link. You apply for that position. Your resume has to indicate that. They'll ask you about that 1 year. What did you do? Then you can say, well, I interpreted in court when needed. They ask you how often. You say, well, maybe a few times a week. Then they have no way of knowing that because you interpret on your own, right? So how are they going to know that? And then once you apply and you overcome that main hurdle, the beginning of it, then they are going to tell you to take a screening test. And the screening test, you will schedule it. You don't pay for any of these things. They'll pay for it. So they'll do a basic background check, very basic. Everybody passes the background check, unless you kill somebody. I don't know. Hopefully that won't be the case. It's not a credit check, okay? It's a background check. And even if you have, misdemeanors and stuff, that might not be a disqualifying factor. Then they tell you to take a placement screening test, which you will take with us. It's with our company, SCSI Testing, because we are the sole contractors for immigration to test, train. We do everything for them, evaluate, interpreters, and everything. So you'll take a screening test that lasts about 30 minutes, consists of 3 simultaneous practices at different speeds. You will have no problem if you do the practice. If you can do Judge's Bench Guide Part 1 and 2 in the lab, you will have no problem with that. And then there is a consecutive, just short sentences, but there is a consecutive as well, which you haven't done too much practice because you do that in the last course in the training, but it's not too complicated. Then once you pass that screening test, then they will sign you up for a training program with us. Basically, it's only 2 weeks, but it's pretty intense training program. And since you know your criminal terminology, if you don't know your criminal terminology, you're always at a disadvantage. You're going to find that 2 weeks should be sufficient. Now, the problem with the training is that it emphasizes immigration stuff. And immigration is, interpreters have to interpret at very fast speed. So there is some lab work to be done, which will be good in this class because you do have some free time in this class, right? Then once you complete the training, you take a final exam with us. I don't grade you. We have graders that do that. And then if you pass that exam, then you already start working in the immigration courts. The pay, I don't know the pay. You have to ask your recruiter. My understanding that it's anywhere between $35 and $50 an hour. You need to check with the recruiter. I don't have any idea about that. The training that you're going to get also includes VRI, video remote interpreting, because they are doing a lot of video remote interpreting cases in immigration. So once you pass that final exam, they send you to work, and then within 2-3 months, while you're working, they record you. So then they send a link to us so we can listen to your rendition. And if you do well, if you pass that, then you just continue interpreting for a year. And then every year you have to kind of take an exam, which is very basic, and to be able to interpret in immigration court.